Good evening. We definitely got ourselves quite a busy weather situation here. Where we are in Texas, it's cloudy. It's almost like a kind of a mid-fall dreary pattern, and I couldn't get the drone up more than a couple hundred feet there, but what I did get was pretty beautiful. Don't often see that. Okay, let's head to our weather and see what's going on and get this thing centered. I got the latest imagery from Hurricane Florence, and this is different from what you might see on the internet because I've picked a color enhancement scheme that really brings out the detail, and we can see the cold convective tops like right there and down in this part of the spiral band. So that really helps us to see what's going on underneath, and if we see things kind of intensifying, usually we'll see these small cellular bits really start filling in. Let's animate this over the past, this is the past 3 hours, and this will kind of give you an idea of what's been going on there. There was a eyewall replacement cycle earlier this afternoon, and that's typical when we have these large storms that go through a series of transitions, eyewall replacement, contraction, and that kind of thing there. We also do have the Dvorak animation that tends to be pretty popular, and this shows the past 24 hours. And basically what we look at is the extent and coverage of the darker, or I should say the colder shades. In this case it would be the black and the embedded white. When we see more of that, that's another sign that the system is intensifying. That's where you have a lot more cloud material in the upper parts of the troposphere, so it shows up colder on the satellite. And let's see, early on you can see in those first few frames that the system definitely does look weaker, and then during the overnight hours, like during the first or second half of that loop, you can see it get a lot colder. We start bringing in those blacks and whites, and just in the last few frames it looks like it's weakening just a tiny bit, but that's very common. The systems go through cycles like we have mentioned, and we should see things start intensifying again in the next 12 to 18 hours. Okay, so let's head into the maps and start going through this mess here. Okay, here's the Atlantic Basin. Florence, of course, Category 4 storm, and looking at 120 knot sustained winds on that, pressure of 945 millibars, and they've got the hurricane warnings in effect all the way from extreme northern coastal North Carolina all the way down to around Myrtle Beach. Pretty much everything from the northeast half of South Carolina to North Carolina itself is under the gun. There have been some changes in the track, and we'll go over that a little bit later when we get into the dynamic models, but there has been kind of a westward shift, and the 18Z models have shown kind of an interesting change, and we're going to get into that shortly. But let's look at the analysis data first, and ocean heat content, that's very important. Typically, if you read about hurricane formation, sea surface temperature, that's often cited as a factor. You know, we want to see sea surface temperatures very warm up near, let me see if I can bring this product up. We want to see that up around 27 Celsius, which is about 80 Fahrenheit. So that's going to be, let's see, 27. That's going to be in these darker oranges to light reds. Yeah, we're definitely above that throughout much of the, I guess if you want to call it the Bermuda Triangle. I guess it's passing through there, but anyway, that's pretty much where the track is, and sea surface temperatures are definitely very good, but also a factor is how deep those sea surface temperatures are. I mean, if you have all that turbidity from the storm and you start overturning some of the deeper layers, if you bring in cold air up to the surface, then maybe your sea surface temperatures aren't going to mean so much. So that's why we use a derived product called ocean heat content, and that's what this is. And this is very good for forecasting hurricanes. And what we want to see for a major Category 3-4 storm is values up over, say, about 70, 80 to 90. So that's going to be getting into these very light aquas and greens. And we definitely have the support for that. In fact, once we get to the Gulf Stream, which is this little band right here, there may be a little bit of intensification there shortly before landfall. And then as we get onto the continental shelf, which is in this area, that may start expending some of the available ocean heat that we have, and then we would probably see a little bit of a de-intensification as it approaches the coast. Kind of maybe bringing that down to category 3 or 2 at the last minute there. Okay, so let's see what's up next. There's another plot of ocean heat content. This one might be a little bit more legible. Not sure if I can get all that in the window, but down on the bottom there's the legend. So this particular analysis is showing OHCs around 50 to 75 along the track. Another factor about this is ocean heat content is also tied to the forward motion of the storm. If the storm slows down, we need more OHC to support the circulation. Otherwise, it's going to start decreasing in intensity. So as this approaches the coast, and you can see these little markers that get tighter and tighter together, that's the slowdown, then we're really going to need high OHCs to support that circulation. So I really don't think we're going to be looking at a Cat 5 storm coming onto the coast or anything like that. Not to say it's not going to be dangerous, but most likely the higher intensities are going to be some distance offshore. Now these are this is the steering later. This particular chart is from 850 up to 500 millibars. So this is like the lowest 3 miles of the atmosphere. And this tends to steer the systems. And what I'm looking for, what we need to do is remove some of these small waves like you see right there and kind of look at the large-scale picture. So maybe something, let me try a different color here. Let's see, red. Yeah, it's a little bit better there. Okay, so what we have here is the Bermuda High offshore. There it is right there. And this is kind of like a mid-tropospheric system that we're looking at, this big high pressure, and it's driving this easterly current that's bringing the storm towards North Carolina. But as it approaches the coast, you can see this area where the lines that you see drawn on here, the streamlines, are kind of absent, and that's the ridge. And that's going to become kind of more significant as we get into Thursday and Friday. And as the system moves into that ridge, it's going to kind of start, I guess a good word for it might be adrift. It's going to start kind of losing its the large-scale current that's driving it, and we should see kind of more of an erratic movement, and that's one thing the models have been picking up on around Thursday or Friday. So we'll be looking at that shortly. So hang in there. One reason I kind of push that back towards the end is because we typically see viewer numbers go up during the webcast. Let me see what we're looking at. Hang on. Yeah, we're going to see the stream gradually increase as far as the viewership, and the people coming in late, they're going to want to see that forecast stuff. So we'll get into that shortly. So let's look around the country. Got a little bit of a tropical wave off the coast of Louisiana that's kind of moving up towards Texas and producing a little bit of showery weather there in Louisiana. And we'll go to the satellite and just kind of go region by region here. Okay, so this is the visible imagery for the U.S. Most parts of the U.S. are looking pretty good, especially up in the north-central U.S. and the Midwest. And down in Texas, there's those clouds that we were seeing on that drone footage. Northwest U.S., they've got a frontal system moving through that area, and you can see that reflected in the high clouds. There it is right there. That's a bit of a baroclinic leaf there. So that's a little upper level system moving through Oregon and Idaho. And another telltale feature is if you go north of that system, there's all this patchy, kind of a chaotic look to these convective clouds here. This is all towering cumulus and stratocumulus, and that's in an area where we have cold air coming on shore and heating and becoming unstable, and we see a lot of this kind kind of a unsettled look with a lot of showers in that region. And then on the other side, it's almost the opposite. Things are pretty quiet. Clear skies and warm temperatures in that region. So just looking strictly at the satellite image, what I might be looking for is maybe a front, maybe something like that right there. So that's just kind of an approximation of where a frontal system might be, but it does look like there's something in the northwest U.S. Southwestern U.S. is looking pretty good. Again, that monsoon is trending downward. Typically, we see that start falling apart in September as we lose heating, and that kind of removes fuel from the monsoon engine in the southwest. And typically, that's driven by that strong heating out in this region right here, and that draws moisture northwestward from Mexico. But with the drawdown in heating, that's kind of shut down that flow right there. So we're seeing less moisture making it up to the Four Corners and southern Rockies. North central U.S. has gotten kind of active once again. Maybe we can animate that and see these fronts, these thunderstorms going up in South Dakota there. And we're just waiting for the JavaScript to catch up here. Just give me just a second. Yeah, we'll skip that, or come back to it later anyway. Yeah, I lost that frame. Anyway, yeah, Texas, we'll just look at that real quick. There's all that moisture and clouds working into East Texas and even as far as DFW. And let's go up to the north central U.S. Pretty cloudy all the way from New England down to New York and down the Appalachians there. And this is kind of an outgoing frontal system, probably somewhere in that area right there, and behind it, some of the drying coming in from the Great Lakes area. And then down in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, tropical, definite a tropical look there, and you can see the sea breeze working inland across the Carolinas, thunderstorms all the way from around Macon up to Columbia, Charlotte, and up to around Lynchburg there. And coming into the right corner there is Florence. So we'll be seeing a little bit more of that over the next couple of days. Colorado has gotten a few thunderstorms there. And we'll just take a quick look at that, developing east of Cheyenne and moving out into the Nebraska Panhandle. And there they go. So I don't know if any chasers are out there, but I'd imagine you'd probably get a few good photos from some of that activity there. And up in North Dakota, I don't know if Fred Reamer's here, but this is in his neck of the woods. Pretty good thunderstorm. We started out clear in that area. You can see a very progressive look to the clouds as frontal system approaches that area, and then big old anvil developing. I think that's just northwest of Grand Forks there. And there's also some strong thunderstorms up in northwest Ontario. Okay, so that's the grand tour. We'll kind of put it together with the thickness chart, and yeah, we can see Florence out there making its way towards the east coast. We've got this outgoing polar system and a bit of a Bermuda high right in this area here. And this is part of that ridging that's going to be slowing down the system. There it is right there across the Appalachians. And let's see, taking a look up in the north central U.S., there's that front coming through the Dakotas. And then up to the north, warm front in northern Ontario. And looks like another blast of cold air coming into Saskatchewan and Manitoba. So some of that may make it into the north central U.S. And then going further out towards the west, looks like there's that frontal system that we were looking at on the other charts. You can see the thickness, the red lines indicating colder air up in this region right here. Typically we use K for cold air. And in between, pretty good thermal gradient. So that's helping to support that front further down to the south. So this is kind of a sign of things to come. We're changing into a fall pattern very quickly. Cold air up in the Arctic region, Northwest Territories fact, there it is right there. And normally we don't see anything like this in September, but this is kind of an unusually cold pattern for this time of year. So if that holds on into October, we should see things start to get cold pretty quickly in the U.S. there. Okay, let me just take a quick look at chat, make sure things are running okay there. All right, move my microphone here and get a better look at this. Carl Berghoff is joining us, and Sue M, JT, Erica Baker, mentioning nuclear power plant, I guess, in North Carolina there. Carl Berghoff mentioning the game. Erica Baker, Southeast Kansas, reporting 80 over 61. JT's got friends that are evacuating from the coast. And JT mentions, yeah, that's North Texas there. That's the Palestine area. Bobby Conway mentioning the hurricane warning, looking at the steering currents. Ryan Toomey's our tropical expert, mentioning that they're still predicting a stall out on westward motion over the Atlantic seaboard and then a shift westward. Yeah, we're going to show that shortly. And Ron Chalfant, good evening. Joe Desert Gardener, greetings from Tucson. Yeah, I used to live out there near 22nd and Cold. Saw a lot of monsoon action there. Richard Wolf, welcome to the webcast. Willie Greenway, out there in Georgia, keeping an eye on things. And yeah, I appreciate that, Carl Berghoff. Yeah, mentioning clicking the likes, that helps out the channel. And yeah, Patreon, I'll just throw this up real quick. That come up there? Let's see. Yeah, you can go to patreon.com and leave something in the tip jar if you find this useful. And of course, I got books at weathergraphics.com, or you can just put in my name into Google, Tim Vasquez, and that should take you to that website. And I've got like 7 or 8 books that you can purchase, and software. In fact, I'll just show you the software that I've written. Digital Atmosphere. And yeah, this is actually a program that I wrote, still maintaining it. And this is showing that high pressure out in the eastern U.S. No longer do we have that very intense green over the Midwest and south central U.S. This is indicative of colder or cooler and drier air that's made its way into the eastern U.S. there. And then just a quick look at dew points. This is where Florence is going to be heading. You can see they're quite high, dew points of 74 in the Wilmington area, 75 around Charleston, 72, and even 76 down there around Savannah. So we've definitely got tropical air in place up and down the East Coast there. Okay, let's see. What are we looking at next? Let's see what's up in my sequence. Yeah, typically when we have active weather like this, I tend to get a little bit out of place. So let's look at the upper level chart. And this shows a little bit of that ridge that's going to be affecting the motion of Florence. And you don't see it so much in the lines on this chart. It's more in the wind plots, if you look at the plots here. And if I do a quick streamline analysis, see right there, that's the wind flow. And let's see if I draw that out. The prevailing westerlies are pretty far up north, up in the Great Lakes area, Ohio, Pennsylvania. But along the coast, there's these easterly winds, kind of northeast, and basically they have an easterly component, and that's marking the center of that ridge. It's kind of right in this area. So once the hurricane gets into this region, that's what's going to slow it down. There's not going to be a whole lot of movement on this ridge. In fact, it may get a little bit stronger. And you can see out in the Atlantic here, easterly winds, so that's helping the storm to progress pretty well. And then right here is where we have that light and variable wind. Okay, I think I've exhausted most of the analysis charts. Yeah, we're about 22 minutes in, so that's about right. So we'll take a quick look at the high resolution rapid refresh and look at the landfall. And this is the 18Z. Yeah, this is the 18Z. Actually, this is the NAM here. So let's watch this, and this is the NAM solution. And here we're up to Thursday morning. This is going to be about daybreak right there. So it's approaching the North Carolina coast. And then we go up to midday. That's going to be about 2 p.m. Eastern time. So later on Thursday, it's going to be approaching the coast there. And then the track is pretty much towards the Wilmington area, maybe just south of there for this particular model. So it looks like maybe some of the main wind problems are going to be overnight, Thursday night into Friday morning. And we'll look at the GFS and the European model very shortly. Let me just make sure I've gotten through all of the charts before we press on. We'll take a quick look at a couple of skew-ts for the weather hobbyists that are into that. There's the Charleston skew-t. That's definitely very tropical. This is Charleston, South Carolina. And I was there many, many years ago on a flight from Germany to DFW, and I remember there was a really stinky paper mill near that airport. I don't know if it's still there, but anyway, yeah, the winds, light and variable, all up and down the column, and this is kind of a sign of the light steering current in the Carolinas there. We'll look at DFW real quick. Lots of moisture. Definitely got the moisture all the way up to about 11 or 12,000 feet. Above that, some drier air. So it looks like the air mass up above that has a little bit of a different origin, maybe from the southwest deserts. And looks like a little bit of a capping inversion up above that. And then we'll look out in Bismarck, where they've had that thunderstorm pop up. Very shallow moisture there this morning, only about maybe 1,000 to 1,500 feet deep. And a pretty good lapse rate. Very steep segment right here from about 5,000 up to about 15,000 feet. So typically when we see a lapse rate that steep, usually there's upper level lift approaching. Typically we don't see that on its own, except like in Arizona, California, where there's really intense surface heating. And all right, so I think we're probably ready to head into the forecast, so let's do that. For the short term for our area, not much change. There's kind of an onshore component there. Let me get my cursor back. Hang on just a second. Yeah, there it is. What we see here is high pressure up in Tennessee and low pressure in New Mexico. And in between, we've got that southeasterly flow. It's kind of a gradient setup like that. So that's bringing the moisture inland. And since we've had a cold front passage, temperatures in this area here are kind of cool. So what that means is overrunning. It's kind of a little bit like a warm front. So what I see in my head is something like that. So that's kind of a stationary front right there, and there's a little bit of overrunning on above that frontal surface, and that helps produce clouds and precip kind of in that area right there. So that's what we're going to see tonight, just kind of dreary weather and more showers, and looks like another wave coming onshore. Then we'll start looking at the upper level pattern. This will show us a little bit of that ridging ahead of Florence. There it is right there. There's that ridge and subtropical high there off the northeast coast. And a pretty strong trough in the northwest U.S. See that right there? That's a huge trough. This would be associated with winter weather if it was December, for sure, especially with that strong northerly current right there in the Arctic. However, this time of year, the ridges, they tend to hold on instead of being displaced eastward. So this thing is kind of locking in and holding its own against that big trough out west. And there's Florence heading towards that ridge, doesn't really know what to do with that, and just slows down and sits there. And you can see the track there. This is the 18Z model. And you notice that it approaches Wilmington and kind of stays offshore late Friday into Saturday. And then we see the southward drift. And this kind of appeared suddenly on the 18Z model. And now we're seeing a track that goes into South Carolina. And there it is, weakening as it comes inland into the Columbia area, then up towards Raleigh, and starts dissipating as it gets inland. So it's hard to say what to make of that when we have these very weak steering currents. That is difficult not only for human forecasters but for the models themselves, because there's very little to go on to steer those storms. I'll show you a couple of other tracks. This is what we saw with the 12Z model. This is the earlier model. This is the different ensemble members that went into the GFS, which is basically the long-term model run out of Washington, D.C. Now the mean track is going to be this thick pink line in the middle, and the final forecast track is this yellow line. So with the morning run, what we saw is most of the ensemble members coming ashore just north of Wilmington, and the final track coming into the Wilmington area itself. And you can see that some of these ensemble members were kind of trending to the west. And of course it was with the 18Z model that we saw more of a track like oh, okay, I'm in paint shop. Okay, so yeah, what we saw with 18Z track was something like this. So that definitely is a little bit further south and further west than what we had with the earlier models. And I do have the European model. Let me show that to you. And again, thanks to F5 Weather for this product. And let me get that centered there. Okay, so what we're looking at is of the European model. Let me bring you the time up at the top. Okay, so up at the top, that shows you what the valid time is UTC. So going forward, this is the 12Z European model. It's pretty much perfectly in line with the GFS as it approaches the Carolina coast. It does reflect that slight southward shift in the track. By Thursday evening, it's approaching the coast and slowing down considerably. And then by Friday morning, European model is still hanging out in the just south of Wilmington. And then as we get into late Friday into Saturday, it's also got the southwestward track into South Carolina. So that's kind of a new development, and I think what we need to do is kind of wait for the 0Z, the current charts, to come out to see if that stays consistent, because what's probably happening is it's all using the same base data, the same analysis information, and maybe the computations are working out the same between the GFS and the European model. So what we want to do is look for consistency once we get the 0Z data in this evening, and the models will run once again, and then probably sometime around just after midnight tonight, we should have the new information and see whether that's kind of a fluke there or if it is indeed tracking more southward. So we shall see. Still a couple more days until that comes into the coastal regions. Okay, and we'll show you the GFS real quick. And this also has the pressure in millibars, and we don't worry too much about the actual number, but more the trend. And you can see we're starting out here about 950. And then as it gets out in this area, it starts weakening, or it starts strengthening a little bit down to 947, and then holding about steady as it approaches the coast. Looks like at that last minute there, 18Z Thursday down to 941, and even more intensification. So maybe we've hit maybe a warm eddy in that Gulf Stream current. So that sometimes that will result in a little bit of surprise intensification. We saw that happen with Katrina and Opal some years ago. And then we see that track southwestward holding at about 940, which is probably going to put it in the Cat 3 range. Probably around Cat 3 there. Drifts south and then swings inland. So kind of the takeaway from this is it looks like Virginia may be out of the woods as far as precipitation, and some of the impacts from all that rain will shift into North Carolina proper and possibly into South Carolina. And let's look at those precip totals, and they have come up kind of like what I expected. A few days ago they were forecasting like 10 to 15 inches, and those have come up quite a bit. And there they are right there. There's the rainfall of, this is a 20-inch band right there. And my geography on North Carolina is not too strong, but I think that's going to be about Morehead City down to about Wilmington. And that could shift a little bit further west and south depending on what happens with these models tonight. So we shall see. Okay, and we'll just go ahead and take one more look at the European model. This is the 500 millibar, and this will kind of show the same pattern right there. You can see the ridge extending from the Bermuda High there into North Carolina and South Carolina. So that's what's going to be slowing down the storm and resulting in this deviant motion that we've been seeing. And there it is. So maybe Willie Greenway will be getting a little bit of that kind of on the edge of the storm, on the southern edge. And let's see, after that, another trough coming into the northwest U.S. Let me get my cursor back. There we go. And this is painting out maybe a frontal system like that right there. So you see that very strong troughing there. That's the cold air that's coming into Montana and Idaho there for early next week. And it looks like the main impact of that will be in the north-central U.S. and the Great Lakes. And very likely that will rapidly pick up the system by early next week, and that should drag the remnants up into maybe Pennsylvania, Ohio. We'll see about that. And let's see, I think that's about it. So trying to think about how to close this, and I think maybe what I'll do is I'll just pull up the NHC forecast. And this has got the official track there, and they're still kind of keeping conservative, going with the earlier model movements, but I think they're watching that closely, that development where the models are going a little bit further south. And if it does look like that's going to pan out, then we may see a shift southward in this track. But for now, looks like the eye is heading towards the Wilmington area, and that should carry most of the storm surge in this region right there. So that's going to be probably kind of significant with a storm like this, especially if it starts slowing down there. Okay, let me review the chat real quick. I'll just kind of skim over this. Carl Berghoff says he refers to my books about daily. I appreciate that. Ron Chalfant reading the Red Book today. Yeah, I'll just pull up the website real quick. Yeah, that's going to be weathergraphics.com. And that's where the books are. Okay, and yep. Anyway, weather analysis and forecasting handbook. That's probably the best starter book. And after that, It's pretty much up to you. I personally prefer Weather Map Handbook and Instability, Skew-t, and Odograph Handbook. That's the newest book that I have. In any case, feel free to check that out and pick something up if you want to learn a little bit more about weather. All right. And I think that'll about do it for me. Y'all take care, and we will be back tomorrow on Wednesday covering Florence there, and we'll have some updates on that and see what the models have done. And hopefully we'll see you there. All right, take care, y'all. Have a good evening.